This is the Bearcast, presented by Bird Culchion Ford. Bird Culchion Ford has been in Waco since 1936. Ford is the #1 selling truck in Texas 43 years running. The Bearcast is also presented by WellMed Medical Management and USMD Health System Dallas. Here's Craig Smoke and Grayson Grundhafer.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome into a very special edition of the Bearcast on Sic'Em 365 Radio, Sic'Em365.com. It is the Bearcast, and it is the special preview edition of the season opener for the Bearcast. After all this time, these many months, these many weeks, through spring football and signing classes and drama and realignment and questions, of which there are still some, and answers of which we'll find out more. Finally, the time has arrived to talk about, well, a topic very near and dear to our hearts, actual football. As Albany will be making their way down to Waco here in the next couple of days, the Great Danes will be setting their sights on McLean Stadium for the opener on Saturday evening, and we have got a lot to talk about. Craig Smoke with you, as always, Sic'Em 365 radio host and writer, joined by Grayson Grundhafer, Director of Broadcasting, also team and recruiting reporter for Sic'Em 365. And Grayson, we've been here in some form or fashion every single week. Now's the time where you see a lot of people firing back up the old microphones to get in on the season. The more the merrier. College football is about to get fired up in a big way, and technically did last weekend, but now it's time for Dave Aranda and the Bears to take the field. How you feeling?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great time, right? College football's back. This is a moment I think everyone's been waiting for, excited about. People are so passionate about college football, and I think that's what makes it so fun. And so now we're finally going to be able to see, more football. I know week 0 happened, but I think week 1 is where you're going to get to see, ranked matchups, big matchups, some rivalries as well, new coaches. It's going to be a lot of fun, and obviously we get to see Baylor as well and see what this version of Baylor is going to look like, coming off of a Big 12 championship a year ago, a Sugar Bowl victory a year ago, and high expectations in Dave Aranda's 3rd year as the Baylor head coach.
Yeah, and he laid it all out on the line during a couple different interviews yesterday. Had his press conference, which was interesting to listen to, and also his one-on-one with Smokey, which was very good stuff, and covered some of the same topics in both, but also kind of veered in different directions with both interviews as well. So there's a good 30-plus minutes of Dave Aranda alone from yesterday that you can listen to in a couple of different ways. We'll get into some of what he talked about, but we're going to hit on some of the main topics leading into this game, of which everybody expects Baylor to win and win handily. It will really be about just the experience, especially for the younger players. It'll be about just the changes and kind of having those right there in front of you and actually taking place, and not in a practice setting against your teammates, but against other live competition. And it'll be about, dipping the toes in the water for others and a million other things, but we'll kind of touch on the main points ahead of the matchup this Saturday, of which last I looked, the Bears are 6 touchdown favorites. 6 touchdown favorites. We can talk about that. The team doesn't need to worry about that. But I think that they know that, kind of like I said in an article today about what Dave Aranda seemed to really say throughout, this is about Baylor doing what they need to do, not so much about Albany. We will talk about Albany, but this is really about the Bears and sharpening their own knives.
Yeah, and I think it's about seeing what guys can do, right? And just seeing, who are going to be the biggest contributors and the biggest factors on this football team, and just see the growth and how everyone's improved over the spring and fall. And I think it's important for the coaches to start to figure out who they can trust as well. The wide receiver position, for instance, is one that I know we're going to talk about here in a little bit, but, they got to figure out who their, 3 to 5 guys are. And I'm not going to say that you're going to know that for sure in the Albany game, but you for sure will get an idea of it, and you will definitely know about it after the BYU game. So there's some important factors, but you're right. This is all about Baylor. This has nothing to do with Albany. This is them going out there and do what they should do, which is dominate this football game. This should not be a close one. We'll talk about kind of our predictions for it. But in general, this is kind of all about Baylor in week 1, and that's what makes it so fun, though, I think, is you finally get to see a product on the football field.
Yes, you do. So let's talk about that product. We'll get into the depth chart. Won't spend a ton of time on that because it's the first depth chart, but there is a couple of things on there that are of note. We'll get into a preview of Albany and then a preview of the season itself, and then the mailbag as well to close things out, and Big 12 predictions. So I want you with the depth chart because, I mean, we know Blake Shapen's the starting quarterback. We don't really need to, get into that. And a lot of other positions we know pretty well what's going on or is what was expected is on that piece of paper that everybody received yesterday. But there are a couple of things. So I'm just going to start reading and stop me when you want to talk about something in particular, okay? So here's the starting depth chart, too deep, I should say, that Baylor football released yesterday, and I have a feeling we're probably going to start right away with some stoppage because wide receivers are listed first, and I'm going by the depth chart that's on Sic'Em365.com. 3 wide receivers listed as first team, and all sophomores, Monterey Baldwin, Hal Presley, and Seth Jones. And then you have others like Javon Gibson and Josh Cameron backing up Seth Jones, Armani Winfield, Jonathan Davidson behind Presley, and Gavin Holmes or Jordan Neighbors behind Monterey Baldwin and Holmes, Winfield, Gibson, Cameron. I think all these guys are people we expect to see a lot of. So take that, starting lineup for what it's worth. But I have to say, Monterey's not the shocker here. And I don't know if shocker is the right word, but hey, Seth Jones, kind of surprising to see his name, and Hal Presley to a lesser extent. But I have a feeling that Seth Jones, who you've talked about recently, was one of those that made you go, okay, when you first saw this depth chart.
Yeah, and, we talked about him probably 2 weeks ago, right? I kind of brought his name up as a guy who had really been rising, and he was a guy that I think everyone just decided to forget about after the spring game. He went out, he was the starter in the spring game. People forget that. He came out in the fall, played really, really well. Him and Josh Cameron have been battling throughout camp for that spot. And overall, Seth won the job. It's not surprising for me because of how well Seth played in the fall and how well he did in the scrimmages as well. But it is a little surprising because Josh played really well also. And so it's just very tough to pick between the two. Seth is going to get the start. Fine with that. I think Hal and Monterey were kind of the locked-in ones that I felt like I was starting to trend towards knowing they were going to be the starters at their position, especially Monterey. We knew that from the beginning of spring camp. But I think Hal coming back from injury, there was a little bit of question marks there, but he's really turned into a go-to guy for them. So it was all about that last position. And those two guys are going to get to play a lot, both Seth Jones and Josh Cameron. So don't read this as only these 3 guys are going to play all year, kind of like it was a year ago. That's not going to happen. You're going to see Javon Gibson. You're going to see Josh Cameron. You're going to see Armani Winfield, and you'll probably get to see Gavin Holmes as well. Those are the guys that I expect to contribute in a big way this year. But I think the other notable part about this depth chart is no Jalen Ellis. And Jonathan Davidson is a walk-on. So is Josh Cameron, but Jonathan Davidson is, well, Josh isn't anymore, I don't believe. But Jonathan Davidson, he's a walk-on. He's in there over Jalen Ellis, which is very, very intriguing in my eyes. I know Jalen dealt with injuries all throughout the spring, but by everything I saw, he was healthy in the fall and just has not found a way to, I guess, put it all together. I'm very curious if he comes out and shows some flashes in the Albany game, if he can work his way back into the mix. But right now, he seems to be on the outside looking in.
All right, elsewhere, looking at the offensive line, pretty much as expected, going left to right. Connor Galvin, Micah Mazuka at left guard, Jacob Gall at center, Grant Miller right guard, Gavin Byers right tackle, and then you got your various backups, Timothy Dawn at center, Mose Jeffrey behind Micah Mazuka at left guard. I'm guessing that's where you'd probably like to start as far as that group of players goes.
Let's just start with the fact that Mascua won the job over Mose.
Mazuka.
Yeah. Oh, Mazuka. Yeah, he won the job over Mose. And I think, that was one where Mose came on really, really strong during the spring. And in my eyes, he would have been the starter after spring ball. But I think talent finally won out. And this is another thing we've talked about for a while. I think Micah gives them the highest ceiling at the position, but Mose is very, very good. And I just want to make sure people keep an eye on Mose. He's going to be a very important depth piece for this offensive line throughout the entire season. I'm very happy to see Micah win the job, but I'm also very equally as happy to see the improvement Mose has made from last year to this year. Both are going to be very important for this offensive line going forward, and congrats to Micah on winning that job. I think that's a big one for this offense to reach their ceiling this year.
Tight end Ben Sims backed up by Drake Dabney, and they can go like 5 or 6 deep. It's scary. Their tight end room, we're going to see a ton of the tight ends this year. Running back Tay McWilliams, and then behind him you've got a bunch of oars. There's a bunch of oars on this depth chart. And again, this is just a very loose thing, which is why we're not going to spend a ton of time on it. But you got Quaylon Jones, who's kind of emerged, and maybe that's some injuries, maybe that's some just he's emerged, and either way that's good because he's not a name we've heard a lot about. Richard Reese, the freshman, and then Josh Fleeks, the senior, as well, but about as expected there.
Yeah, and those two guys, Quaylon and Richard Reese, they performed extremely well. Squirrel missed some time in the fall, and those two guys rose to the occasion. And it's definitely been more about what they've done than the fact that Squirrel hasn't been there. They have performed really well. They're going to have a role in this team going forward, and Tay being the starter makes all the sense in the world. And Squirrel is not on the depth chart because I think the kind of guess is he probably won't play, and that might be the reason why.
Yeah, Aranda was asked about him and Al Walcott. You know, a couple weeks back when I was at practice, I had posted simply on the premium forums. I didn't go to Twitter and blast that they were hurt or anything. I just only on the premium forums, but of course it just kind of spreads and other people saw him, and so he got asked about it a couple times, and he's just averted it. Like, he does not answer injury questions ever, really, you know, unless he kind of just has no other choice, and so he said a lot without saying absolutely anything about Al Walcott or Craig Williams yesterday during his press conference. Like, he mentioned them as like leaders and stuff, but he didn't say anything about their status. So we'll see on Saturday, but I would be kind of surprised if we saw Squirrel against Albany. And Al Walcott, he had a wrap on his hand. I mean, that could already be off by now for all we know. So that's not, like I said, it's not why I was blasting it out there for like, oh my gosh, these guys are hurt. You know, they're hopefully going to be back sooner rather than later.
And to me, it matters a lot less for Squirrel than Al, because we know what Squirrel can do at running back.
Right.
We know this. That I'm not worried about. When he's healthy, he's great. I think we all know that. Al, on the other hand, you know, he's working in a new position, and we're going to talk about that here in a minute, but I think it's kind of important for him to get some reps. He's missed a lot of fall camp, and I don't know what to expect from him. I think he's going to be great, but we haven't seen it on the field, and for him to just get thrown in against BYU, that would kind of be a tough adjustment, I would think.
Quarterback, you got Blake Shapen. So there's your offense. So really, I mean, I guess you could say Seth Jones at wide receiver, Micah Mazuka as a starter on the O-line, even though, you know, you've talked plenty about him, or kind of, I guess, those are noticeable and things that were, you know, not necessarily predicted beforehand. But there's your offense as a whole. Defensively, I mean, you know what's up front. Bunch of big, nasty dudes. Maxwell, Ika, Gabe Hall. You've got them as your starting, you know, three-man front. And then just a bunch of oars, you know, Jackson Player, TJ Franklin, Cooper Lands. I mean, a ton of different guys. Linebacking core at your jack spot, you got an oar with Garmin Randolph and the super senior type in Bryson Jackson, who also single-digit, which we'll get to in just a moment. Will, you got Matt Jones, who I'm excited to see this year. Mike, of course, the stable, tried and true there in the middle, man, and Dylan Doyle. And, yeah, I guess there's your three linebacker spots right there.
Yeah, I was going to say let's stop there because we're going to have to talk a little bit more when we get a little bit lower down on the depth chart. But I think the interesting ones, Cooper Lands on second team getting an oar with TJ Franklin, that's intriguing to me. I think Lands is going to play some this year, but I wasn't sure if he would even be listed on the depth chart, to be honest with you. I thought he'd be more like third team and just get some reps against, you know, maybe the weaker teams on the schedule. But this tells me that they might actually have a role for him. I don't think he's going to be playing over TJ Franklin or really eating into too many of his snaps, but maybe on passing downs, they feel like Cooper could make an impact as a pass rusher. Outside of that, everything else is pretty much what I expected on the defensive line. Moving on to Jack, Garmin Randolph, Bryson Jackson, they've been the starters there for a long time. Bryson is also going to get snaps at the will position as a blitzer, kind of like what we saw against Ole Miss this past year. Elite quality, his ability to get after the quarterback. So that's kind of why he's listed at both there. As far as the backups at Jackie Marshall, Tony Nyanwu, very interested to see how they do as well. And then also Josh White. He's listed at Mike linebacker instead of Will. He was doing a lot of the Will work during fall camp, but now maybe he's made the full move to Mike, and he's the primary backup to Dylan Doyle. Fascinated to see how that all works out as well and how many reps he actually gets this year. All
right, in the secondary, Al Walcott at star. You got Christian Morgan at safety along with Devin Lemire, and then Mark Milton and Lorando Johnson as your starting corners. So definitely seeing the use side of whoever is going to play opposite of Mark Milton at corner. And then, Christian Morgan, who hadn't really been talked about a bunch, has kind of been more of a backup type the way that they've talked about it, but listed as star. Maybe that's a courtesy for the seniors. Hey, it's the first game of the senior year, super senior year, whatever. Give them the nod there. But either way, there's your secondary, and that rounds out the defense.
Yeah, so I have a couple thoughts here. Let me start with cornerback because it's a little bit easier. This is who I expected to be the starters at cornerback when the season started. Once Lorando made the move from star to cornerback, it was pretty apparent that he was likely going to start there. And Mark Milton was kind of locked in as the veteran at the position. I like the backups there. Chateau Reed, Tevin Williams, A.J. McCarty, Reggie Bush. Great group of backups and very talented. I think you're going to see all of them play against Albany, and I think you might see all of them play throughout the year. And I'm actually, Reggie Bush has been fantastic throughout fall camp. There's a chance that he does not redshirt if he is truly as impactful as he has been throughout the fall. Safety, though. This is really interesting. So I think Devin Neal has been playing some star, so it makes sense that he's listed at the star. I also think this might be indicative to a possibility that Al Walcott does not play against Albany, which would therefore mean that Devin Neal would start at the star position instead of starting somewhere else. That would make some sense to me. I think when the season gets rolling, I'd be very curious if he doesn't take over the boundary safety position, which is where Christian Morgan currently is listed. It just seems that way. But in general, it looks like Devin Neal and Christian Morgan are kind of going to be floating around and playing a lot of snaps, but also floating. Al Walcott locked in at the star. And then the only guy that's really entrenched as a starter at safety is really Devin Lemire. He's literally been the starter at field safety since the beginning of spring camp, and he's been that way ever since. He's been very, very good throughout fall camp, a guy who's been a big riser, and they've needed that because they need someone to replace JT Woods. Now, I will mention, it's not going to be a one-for-one thing. He does not have the speed, especially the deep speed that JT Woods has, but in two high safety looks, he is very, very good, and he's got the one thing that JT Woods also had. He has a knack for forcing turnovers, so keep an eye on Devin Lemire as the season progresses.
All right, rounding out this depth chart here, looking at special teams, not a lot to discuss, I don't believe, and I just had it. Field goals, you got Isaiah Hankins, Noah Rauschenberg on kickoffs, Isaac Power at punter, and then kick returns, you've got Monterey Baldwin and Richard Reese listed as both your kick returners and your punt returners. So that's who you can expect to see, and interesting how that might change just because of Monterey and Richard Reese. Those aren't very big dudes that are back there, and then Richard Reese, you wonder how much burn he's getting at running back and kind of who else goes in there, but I don't think anything too shocking as far as special teams go. So there's your Baylor depth chart. We also learned as of today, officially listed on the BaylorBears.com website, that single digits have been handed out. That was something I asked Aranda about early in camp. And it might seem like something just kind of silly or whatever to some people. I definitely had those comments. But the reason why I asked it basically the first practice of camp, do you know why? Because there are more important questions later on in camp. So when better to ask it than right at the beginning and kind of get an idea of how Aranda wanted to do that. He didn't make it sound as though he wanted to do like a whole big ordeal like it kind of was with Matt Rule. And he even talked about it being motivation for young guys to do things the right way, take care of school, and then be rewarded. But it looks like some combination of the two is what eventually emerged as far as their single-digit selections, because it does have some flair of being the more veteran-laden those guys, but without all the flair and everything that came with that and the graphics and all that kind of jazz. And there's not a lot of young guys taking these spots. So it's interesting that the way he positioned it and the way it actually turned out to be was kind of like how you would typically peg it, although there were a couple of surprises. So 0, Craig Williams. No number 1. 2, Matt Jones. 3, Mark Milton. 4, Christian Morgan, which doesn't change for him. 5 also doesn't change. That's Dylan Doyle. 6 also doesn't change. That's Gavin Holmes. Those were the 3 that they had originally. But joining Squirrel and Matt Jones, you got Bryson Jackson with number 7. Ben Sims will rock number 8, and then TJ Franklin getting number 9. I noticed for a lot of these guys, not all of them, but it's just basically taking one number off of their usual numbers, and that's, resulting in the single digits. But either way, there you go. There's the single digits. Not big announcement, but I just posted on the website, and cool to see. And no number 1, but whatever, cool.
Yeah, and clearly, Dave Aranda's not making it a big thing like Rule did. This is more just about, he wants guys to earn those single digits.
Like I said, he's rewarding guys.
Yeah, he's just rewarding. You're exactly right. And so for me, looking at this, if Squirrel's healthy and rocking 0, that dude's going to run for 2,000 yards.
Yep.
That's such a cool number for a running back. So that's pretty awesome. I'm glad to see Mark Milton is no longer wearing 37. My goodness, that was kind of tough to watch. That's not a great number. So now he's number 3. So that'll be good. Ben Sims in 8. TJ Franklin earning a single digit, I think, is really cool. Speaks to kind of the strides that he's continued to make within the program. And Bryson Jackson, a guy who I just feel like is a guy that no one really talked about until he was at Big 12 Media Days. He was kind of a forgotten guy, even though he had some big moments last year. But I think you're starting to see how much they really value him and how big of a part of the program that he truly is. So very cool to see these guys earn these numbers. Matt Jones, of course, as well, another veteran leader. So very, very cool. And I think it's a unique thing that Dave Aranda did, but not as big of a deal as Matt Rule did in the past.
Yep. So was able to ask that. You can go back and read his answers to that in an article I did like 3 months ago, it seems like at this point. But cool to have that out there and that answered. And we'll see how those guys perform, but definitely some big shoes to fill for those guys who did make that such a big deal over the last few years. Now, elsewhere, there's the opponent, the Albany Great Danes. They're coming down from the state capital of New York. And Dave Aranda had several thoughts just kind of in general. And, again, I'll revert back to it's really more about what Baylor does and how they execute and how they operate. But, Grayson, what do the folks out there need to know about the Albany Great Danes?
Yeah, I think just in general, talking about what they did last year is probably a great place to start. They got destroyed by North Dakota State 28-6. They went 2-9 on the year. They went to Syracuse last year, lost 24-62. So got blown out there. They also had some sneaky close games, though. They played a ranked Delaware team, lost 15-20. A ranked Villanova team lost 10-17. Of course, this is ranked in the FCS, not at the FBS level. So there were some close games to go along with the games that they got blown out. But in general, when they played Power 5 competition like Syracuse, they got demolished. So I'm kind of expecting that going forward into this game. I think most people would. Now, as far as what they did also statistically, they average right around 19 points per game. 26 points per game is what they allowed defensively. On the offensive side, they ran for only 91 yards per game. So not a very good rushing football team. And now they're playing the best run defense they've seen in a long time. It might be ever. I don't even know, but this is going to be a very tough test for them running the football. Throwing the ball, they averaged 212 yards passing last year. So in total, about 303 yards per game were their averages for the entire season. So not extremely explosive on offense. On defense, they gave up 26 points per game. Keep in mind, that does include a game where they gave up 62 points. So really that number is inflated a little bit. As far as what they did on the defensive side, gave up 162 yards passing per game. And on the defense side, gave up 185 yards rushing. So pretty balanced what they gave up on the defensive side as well. Specific players, there aren't very many guys that I'm looking at and going, that's a true difference maker on this team. They have some good wide receivers, a couple guys returning who made an impact for them there. So they might take some shots deep downfield. But outside of that, there's just not a lot that's worrying me about this football team.
Dave Aranda didn't mention a single player by name. He referred to some guys, though, like the running back transfer Todd Sibley Jr., who comes over from Pitt, where he played multiple years. So that's a guy of note. He mentioned that running the ball is their bread and butter, basically. I'm not worried about them running the football in Baylor.
90 yards per game last year. My gosh, that's not really a bread and butter.
Yeah, I mean, he didn't say bread and butter, but running the ball is a huge part of what they do. But it's a huge part of what they do, just like it is for everybody. The run sets up the pass, and then, hey, you can do both, and, hey, you can have more success. I mean, that's basically the gist of it. But complimentary and respectful, but, I mean, there's not a lot to write home about here. I mean, like I said, 6 touchdown favorites in this game, playing at home, and with the defense they have, it should be a very handy victory for Baylor, and should be one where, you're coasting and feeling good about just being able to watch the game, for the most part, pretty carefree. I mean, that's why you have games like this. It's a payday for Albany. It's a warm-up and a test for Baylor to kind of see where they are and get their feet wet a little bit.
Yeah, and Syracuse wasn't very good last year.
No,
and they won.
Dino Babers should probably not be head coach there anymore.
So.
But yeah, it's just part of the deal, and that's another hot seat that'll be hot once again this offseason, I'm sure, as it has been for what seems like quite a while now at this point.
And we'll dive deeper into the teams later on, but this game, like we've talked about, it's all about
we'll
Baylor.
Talk Texas and Oklahoma and get into some individuals, but, let's just be kind of realistic about the situation.
Right.
This is not a game that they should have a whole lot of trouble with. Now, the coaches can't say that, and the players can't think that, but, that is what the deal is here. So, heavy favorites. Aranda mentioned they've got veteran back end. They got a defensive front that plays with technique and tries to leverage the run game. They got mismatch at tight end. All that good stuff sounds good, and I'm sure that they'll have that on full display. I guess the one thing they can't really account for is just the wrinkles that every new team brings to the new season. What have they worked on, and what could they have in their arsenal that you're not expecting or haven't seen on film? But even then, they need like 10 of those things to catch Baylor completely off guard and make this a contest. So Albany, it is what it is, but the Great Danes making their way down from New York, and we will see them in person on Saturday. So there you go with that. Now, how do you want to do this next phase here, Grayson, as far as we've got the mailbag and we've got the Big 12 games, but the season itself,
Just expectations, I think, and what games, I guess, record and what games you find problematic for Baylor.
So we're not going to go one by one. Okay,
we don't
good.
Have to.
Yeah, no, I don't think we need to do that necessarily because we're going to delve each week deeply into each individual game. But I'll tell you this: I was at 8-4 pretty much this whole offseason. And the closer we get, yes, I have questions about skill positions, but I'm looking at the rest of the Big 12, and I'm just trying to figure out, even with road games, of why I'm supposed to think Baylor's going to lose multiple games, and I'm having a harder and harder time doing it as we get closer because of the strengths of their lines and just some of the players they have returning that I'm excited to see, especially on defense. I do worry a little bit about just the lack of experience at skill spots. Offense, there's like basically zero returning. You got like a couple of squirrel games in like Tay garbage time, and but there's not like Gavin from like 3 years ago when he but those are like the stats you're really playing with a lot of this offense outside of Blake Shapen. So like that remains a concern, but I'm leaning closer to 10 games than I am 8 games at this point, just because even those road games, I respect Iowa State, but I don't think that Baylor can't beat them in Ames, Iowa. I respect Texas, but that doesn't mean I don't think Baylor can beat them in Austin. Now, I'm not ready to think that this team, as young and as inexperienced as it is just going to go through the whole road slate unscathed. So that's why I'm not, going all in on undefeated. But I do think they're going to drop a couple of regular season games. But that's an improvement on me thinking they were going to drop like 4 of those regular season games. So that's kind of where I'm at. I'm in that 9 to 10 range now, more so than I am. And I'm talking regular season. More so than I am 8-4, which is a moderate, minuscule difference, really, but not really, because winning 9 or 10 games is a way bigger deal than winning 8.
So if you were to put on paper, would you say 9-3 or 10-2?
I think I'd like I think I'd lean more towards 10-2, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, and I've been at 10-2 for a while. I think this team's really, really good. And I think it's been pretty obvious. And everything that I've said, it's all about the offensive and defensive lines. They are extremely stout there, and that usually bodes really well, especially if you have a quarterback that's very good. Baylor decided to replace their starting senior quarterback with Blake Shapen, so they see an upgrade there. I think Shapen's going to be a top 3 quarterback in the Big 12 to go along with what they have up front. That's a great combination. And I look up and down this schedule, and I go, okay, at BYU. They absolutely mauled BYU a year ago, and both are returning a lot on both sides on the offensive and defensive lines. But why is that a good thing for BYU after they got mauled by Baylor a year ago on the offensive and defensive line? So that game doesn't worry me as much. The games that worry me are kind of the games that I think are a little bit sneaky, as well as just tough road environments. So going to Iowa State to start Big 12 play. That's a little concerning. Sure. Iowa State plays really good defense. They're hard-nosed. They're well-coached. That's a concern. Do I think Hunter Deckers is some out-of-this-world talent? No. So I think that gives Baylor an advantage there. At West Virginia on a Thursday night. That is a very tough place to play and a game that they absolutely could drop, and one that if I were projecting their losses, that would be one in my eyes that I think they could lose. And then
I don't think West Virginia is going to be all that great. I really don't.
We're going to find out on Thursday.
No, I know, but I'm with you though. Like I'm looking where my losses are coming from. They got to come from somewhere, and West Virginia might be that team.
And they've never won there, and it's on a Thursday. It's just a tough situation coming off of beating Oklahoma State, which I'm projecting. It's just one of those games that's a little bit of a trap game. And then at Oklahoma in Norman, that's just tough.
That's one I had pegged as a loss. Yeah.
That's just really hard for me to sit there and project that they're going to go to Oklahoma and beat them. Now, I will say,
which they've done like twice ever, maybe once ever.
Yeah. Right? It was 2014.
Yeah.
It's the only time. So I don't know. That's a tough one. I do think if they play them on a neutral site, as in if they play them in the Big 12 championship, I think Baylor can absolutely beat Oklahoma. And I would probably predict that. If they're playing neutral or at Baylor, I'd pick Baylor to win that game. But I think that'll be tough. That's where my other loss is, I think. So I have them going 10-2. I think that's super fair. I think it's also fair if you wanted to say 9-3 or if you wanted to say 11-1 or 12-0. That's fine as well. We've talked about 8-4 being the floor. I absolutely still believe that.
I maintain that.
It would take a lot.
Yeah.
It would take a lot for them to go 8-4 in my eyes. It would also take a lot for them to go 12-0.
Yeah. I mean, to go through if they were able to go through the road schedule and take off, boxes like winning the first time ever in Morgantown, winning the second time ever in Norman, winning in BYU, like all these different
winning in Austin where they've struggled.
The very end of the year, Black Friday, when who knows what situation Texas or Baylor are in at that point in the year. That could be like playing for bowl eligibility for Texas for all we know, or that could be for a Big 12 title spot for all we know for both teams. So, yeah, I'm with you. I guess I definitely lean more towards 9 and 10 than I would 8, but 8's definitely the floor. I think anything. Yeah, I can't even come up with 4 losses for them to go 8-4, but that's kind of where I sit.
So I do have a question. Are you leaning closer to do you think there's a bigger, a higher chance that they finish 9-3 or 11-1?
9-3.
Okay, so I'm on the opposite. I think there's a better chance that they go 11-1 than 9-3.
Yeah, there's too many question marks for me. Even if they're not huge questions, I need to see this team play with as many new faces in big roles as there's going to be, and a new quarterback. I mean, yeah, we saw him at the end of the year, but we didn't see him suiting up from moment one. And I know everybody's very confident about shape, and I am as well, but, just the grind of the season to get through at that point, who the heck knows, man? So you just take it week by week. But, yeah, in a perfect world, if you could ensure me, no injuries, everything's fine, there's no coaches leaving, there's no, drama outside that is distracting, no anything – then, yeah, I'd probably lean more towards 11 or 12 wins. But, I mean, it's football season. There's going to be some wonky things that go on at some point, some adversity.
Yeah, so you mentioned that you don't think West Virginia is very good. What are the, if there's 3 games that you're I think they're going to lose, or you know what I mean? To get you to that 10-2 or 9-3, what are those?
I just told you I could give you West Virginia. I mean, I'm just not convinced they're going to be that good because everybody's doing this based simply off just the quarterback pickup. And I get JT Daniels is an upgrade over who they had, so he could make a huge difference for them. But yeah, I'd say that one. Iowa State is another one, and Oklahoma. I guess I'd go with those 3. I still, I don't know how good Tech's going to be, but I don't like them going out to Lubbock with all that swirls with the familiarity and just how much that game's going to probably mean to the home team in that one. And so there's some landmines, Texas at the end, but those would be the 3 I'd probably lean heaviest on.
Okay.
And maybe I'd switch one for Texas at the end of the year, West Virginia perhaps, but that's where I sit. So, folks, I mean, who cares? We're predicting 9-10 wins for this team. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah.
Compared to what we were predicting this podcast 2 and 3 years ago, life's pretty good for the Baylor Bears. So maybe those losses don't come at all, but if a couple of them do come up, that won't be totally surprising, and some teams will have definitely earned it because we both think that Baylor's going to be pretty dadgum good this year if that hasn't been evident over the course of the last few months, because even my pessimism, I think my floor has been 8-4 at worst. So, I mean, that's not too bad at all when you really think about it.
And so either way, if you have not placed a bet on Baylor's win total, go do that. Because 7.5, they are absolutely.
Oh yeah, I definitely going over 7.5.
They're covering that.
Throw 100 on there for me because I don't have access. I don't even know how any of that stuff works. But yeah, I would definitely throw a hundo on there if I had the ability to. So yeah, that's kind of where we sit. But Albany up first, and then of course turn around next week, and it's on the road to Provo and BYU. So that we'll definitely get deeper. By the way, the Cougars, as we'll get deeper into them than we did Albany's roster, but. Not sure, long-term wise, but Puka Nacua and gosh, I just went blank on the other. Gunnar Romney, I believe, are both hurt right now.
Wow.
So if they're not available next week, that would not really be a good thing for BYU in any shape or form or fashion. So
here comes Gary.
Not promising any of that, but like right now they apparently are banged up. So we'll see if that lasts beyond this weekend.
Gary Bohannon, week 1 coming up for them.
Yeah. So you would assume that they might give them a little bit of a rest before Baylor, but this Saturday will tell us a lot about kind of where those guys sit and whether or not you might be eyeing them being available for the game in Provo, which they'll need that. They'll need those guys to be available. So let's get into the mailbag, and then we'll close out with our Big 12 predictions. And got quite a few questions on the mailbag this week. If you got the first one, go ahead and fire it off there.
Yeah, so Scotty B, the Baylor King. I noticed that Albany has 2 guys with 400 yards receiving returning at wide receiver this year. How well do you think Baylor contains the passing game, especially those 2 guys? So he's mentioning Roy Alexander and Jackson Parker. Both guys were nearly at 500 yards, but I mean, they combined for 4 touchdowns. I don't think they're going to be too big of a problem. You might see a couple big plays here or there, especially because they'll probably play the whole game against Baylor backups as well. But I don't anticipate them having any sort of impact that challenges Baylor to really much of a degree at all.
Yeah, same here. I don't worry about their personnel all that much. I want to be respectful, but it is what it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Does Baylor get 2 100-yard rushers in this game?
Yes, pretty easily.
Who are you going to say?
Well, so if Squirrel doesn't play, then I think Tay is definitely getting 100 yards. And then I think he'll probably be done at halftime. And then it's going to be probably one of Quaylen or Richard Reese. I'll go with Richard Reese. How about that? His first game as a true freshman, he'll run for 100 yards.
Scotty B, anyways, I want to give a shout-out to volleyball and knocking out the defending champs Wisconsin this past Saturday despite losing the prior game to Minnesota. And, yeah, shout-out to Faith Lynch and the rest of the Baylor volleyball team for their big win. And I did see that result come across, and congrats, Ryan McGuire and company getting a nice moment to start the year, and good luck the rest of the way. Moats arc of the starters named today, who are 2 players on O, 2 players on D, you think fans will be most impressed by as the season progresses?
Ooh, most impressed by. That's such a tough one because that basically says it needs to be someone that most fans aren't thinking about, right? Or aren't on their radar. That's how I look at it, at least. I don't look at it as, name Ben Sims. You know what I mean? It's got to be a little bit of a surprise.
Some under-the-radar guys.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with, Josh Cameron's not listed as a starter, so I guess, does it have to be a starter? But I'm going to name him. I think he's going to impress some people this year. I think he's going to have a great year and be one of their probably top 3 receivers. And then I guess I think the other one would be Micah Mazuka. I think he's going to be great this year. I think he's going to be a fantastic player, and you're going to see a guy who can really move people up front and is athletic enough to be a problem in the wide zone scheme. So I think those 2 guys are pretty good bets.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing, some of the young receivers, Hal Presley. I'm looking forward to seeing Richard Reese. I mean, those aren't under the radar guys necessarily, but those are a couple I'm really looking forward to seeing. Looking forward to seeing, the defense just as a whole kind of mixing it up, but especially that secondary with some newer faces.
And he said defense as well, so I guess I would name Devin Lemire, who I talked about a little bit earlier on. I think he's going to be great. And then Bryson Jackson. How about a very underrated guy who I think people are sleeping on a little bit, who's going to have a very impactful year?
Yep, new single-digit Bryson Jackson. Dak JD90, will we see more of Luke Anthony or Kyron Drones on Saturday? It's assuming it's a blowout by halftime like it should be.
I think Kyron is going to get a lot of time in this game. I think they know what Luke can do, and Luke has played a lot of college football, so they really need Kyron to get more reps. So I think he'll play probably more snaps than Luke does on that day.
I would assume so. I mean, it makes sense for Kyron to get more snaps. Luke's had years in the game, and he's coming in as security and, somebody with starting experience, but you got to get Kyron ready for the future, whatever that future may be. So, yeah, I definitely think it needs to be Kyron. Ryan Allen Long, now that football's back, time for the tough questions. What's your dream vacation spot and why? Thanks, I will hang up and listen.
Wow. Dream vacation spot. You know where it is right now? It's actually Banff, Canada. Really, really like that area. Great for hiking, which my wife and I love to hike. Great mountains, really pretty. So right now, that's the top place on my bucket list at the moment.
Yeah, I swing back and forth between like national park style, like mountains and beaches, and I just kind of go all over the place in different spots. But this is not so much a dream because, well, I guess it is. It's a simple dream though in comparison to like some exotic locale or whatever, but I just want to go to San Diego, man. I always hear such great things about San Diego, and everybody I've ever known that's known me well enough is like, you would love San Diego. So I just feel like it's overdue for me to go there and enjoy myself.
I was there this summer, and I will reiterate, it was amazing. The beach is beautiful there. It's a very beautiful place.
Yeah, so that's not like I'm going to go to London, England, or, I don't know what that would be, that kind of like an all-timer of a trip, but something in that same vein, some exotic beach or a mountain resort type thing like you're talking about. But yeah, I'll go San Diego for right now. Maybe they'll join the conference, and that'll be an easy road trip for me to make. I'll go there a few days early. AF Blue 82 over-under on players at each position that get reps on Saturday. Quarterback, 3.5. Over-under on players, I'm going under. There's not going to be more than 3 quarterbacks playing. There shouldn't be.
Yeah, I'm thinking on that a little bit because I think the 3. I mean, we saw like Brandon Bass played in last year's game. I'm going to take the over. I think 4 guys will play.
Running back 5.5.
Ooh, okay. So Squirrel's not playing under. Since Squirrel's not playing, because I think the other guys will all get reps.
Yeah, I'd say probably under. Yeah, I don't know about 6 guys carrying the football. I mean, reps though, it doesn't have to be carrying the football. But yeah, I'll still say, I don't know, break even, I guess, on the I guess
can't have a half
special
guy.
Teams count, like, I mean,
no, gotta be
rest of running back. I'll
position.
go under then at 5.5.
Wide receiver 9.5.
I'll go under on that.
I'll go over.
Okay.
I think they'll get guys on the field.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is Albany, they should blow them out. Like, but probably empty. Yeah, they'll empty the bench, so probably all of these should be over. Tight end 4.5, okay, over. That's like that one for sure. I'd say that one I feel the most confident about being over. Quarterback, I think that'll be kind of play it by ear. But yeah, running back and wide receiver, in theory, you should empty the bench. So however many guys they have in the depth chart, and if they have 6 running backs, then 6 running backs will probably play to some extent. And wide receiver, I think that's the one I probably feel the most confident about. 10 guys seeing time at one point or another. AF Blue also asks, who leads the team in sacks for Albany? Who leads the team in touchdowns for Albany?
Ooh, touchdowns, I'm going to go with Tay McWilliams.
Yeah.
I think that's a fairly safe bet there. Sacks, oh, man, that's a tough one. How about Bryson Jackson? How about we just keep the trend going? I'll go with Bryson.
I'll go with, Bryson is kind of their rusher, although he's trying to be more than that this year, so he doesn't tip opposing offenses. Trying to think who's all on the defense. I don't know.
Matt Jones would be probably.
That's the one I was kind of stuck on. Was like, is that too obvious? That Matt? I can go Matt Jones. I mean, that's the name that's kind of ringing in my head a little bit. So yeah, who leads the team in touchdowns? I'll go with Blake Shapen. He'll probably lead the team in touchdowns. If that counts, then let that count. So I'll go Blake Shapen. But outside of that, I'd say maybe a Richard Reese. I could see him running more than maybe some of the others and being in there a bit longer. Just the bear in a frog world. Dave Aranda reminds me of Tony Dungy as a soft-spoken coach who doesn't throw tantrums to get his point across. In his first year, people seem to label him as a soft. How would you describe Dave's coaching style and how he's able to be successful as a head coach given his personality? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, I mean, he's an elite mind. I mean, he knows the game extremely well, and I think because of that, he's able to really get his point across to his players. I also think he's hired guys extremely well as well, and they want to work for him because they trust him and trust his knowledge and ability to put a good product on the field. So I think those are the reasons. I mean, given his personality, I don't think his personality is a drawback at all. I think it's just one of those things where behind closed doors, those people know him a lot better and trust him. I think he's a very trustworthy guy. And I think because of that, great coaches want to be around him. Great coaches want to learn from him. And it's also allowed him to learn a lot from great coaches as well. So I think that's kind of how I would describe him.
Yeah, I'd say, quiet but carries a big stick, and probably a lot more talkative behind the scenes and behind closed doors with, individual players and discussions than we probably could imagine just seeing him on the surface as we do. But yeah, just calm, cool, and calculated, but in a very open way still. How would you describe Dave? Okay, secondly, I can't imagine he's in the locker room screaming at guys, get them fired up before a game. Who's the hype man? And more importantly, have you ever seen Dave Aranda bust a move? I mean, he'll yell on occasion. He's just not going to rant and rave and scream at somebody like and get in their face and all that. But you see him, yell on occasion just to fire guys up. But yeah, it's not a regular deal. But their assistants on the sidelines and the peripheral guys, that's like almost their job is to create that energy and that excitement. You'll see them waving towels and you'll see them riling guys up, and that's really where a lot of that manufactured excitement kind of comes from.
Yeah, I was going to say Vic Valoria and the entire strength and conditioning staff, they are just awesome. Yeah. They bring the energy, and I think they're the guys who are maybe, quote-unquote, the hype men, I guess.
Yeah, strength and conditioning staff really takes a large part of that. And then, other peripheral coaches on the sidelines as well. And then, get the players into it, and then hopefully you spread like wildfire that energy. And he definitely focused on energy and building that throughout games during his press conference yesterday. So that's definitely going to be an emphasis, is creating that energy, even if it's 50-0 in the third quarter and everybody's gone, from the stadium. Yeah. How do they keep creating that and then have it last through the fourth quarter? So that will be interesting to see. And strength and conditioning staff will probably be a large part of that, especially late in that game as it's waning. Polo Bear, with the offseason coming to a close, what were some of the dumbest storylines this offseason in college football?
Wow, good question.
Sark not releasing a depth chart.
No. I mean,
that's kind of a dumb one. Yeah, I saw way too much about that.
Some of these NIL deals that I've seen, those have been pretty dumb. But it's been a big storyline. I'm trying to think what are some other storylines.
I mean, really, there were substantial ones. There was like realignment. There's the Big Ten, it's TV deal, and there was things like that. I don't consider those like dumb storylines.
The Jimbo Nick Saban thing.
That was dumb. Yeah, that was dumb. I might go with that one. That is a very SEC beef right there, which is sometimes very entertaining, but this version I didn't particularly care for.
I think one of the dumbest storylines is the whole Yormark versus Klyavkov. Yeah, I think that's been pretty dumb and pretty. I think people are trying to hype that up more than it actually is as far as tension goes.
Yeah, I don't think there's much to that. I think maybe the Pac-12 defenders is kind of a dumb thing, and the whole Big 12 defenders and who's who and who's right or wrong or whatever. It's like they're both just trying to survive, and I think some of the Pac-12 side of stuff is straight goofy. But I'm sure they feel the same way about the Big 12, so they'll both be alive this season and probably for seasons to come, but I still maintain I like the Big 12's position better. For whatever reason, whether that's a nod and the feather to the cap of the Pac-12, that the Big 12's on stronger footing because none of their teams are wanted. Whatever makes you feel better. I'm tired of the back and forth at this point. I just want to see football. So, some of that stuff too, but nothing too terribly bad. ZT Smith, 423. What, if anything, can we learn from this first game?
Yeah, for me in this first game, it has everything to do with Baylor. Are they dominating up front on both sides of the ball? Are they being able to run their offense and do things, especially like running the football when Albany knows they're going to run the football? It's those little things that I'm going to be paying attention to. It's also assignments. Are you blowing assignments on defense? Are you missing tackles? Do you look like a well-coached team? I think all of those things are probably some of the biggest takeaways. I would also say, naturally, we're all going to probably be paying attention to Blake Shapen and how he looks, how accurate he is, how he's delivering the football, along with these wide receivers. Are they catching the football? Are they creating separation? Those type of things do matter to me because they should be creating separation quite often. They should be winning routes downfield, and Shapen should be able to hit them. That just frankly should absolutely happen. But outside of that, that's pretty much it. It's just those little things about Baylor that I'm going to take away from it.
Yeah, same sort of for me. Nothing much from what Albany's going to do. Just more or less seeing guys out there, some of them for the first time or some of them first time in a long time, and just kind of picking up on how they've progressed and how they've evolved and, what they're doing and whether they look like they know what they're doing or not, and, how many times they trip over themselves and, what's smooth, what's not. I mean, Aranda spent time talking about, like, their whole, like, last scrimmage, basically, like a large portion of it was just going through, like, pregame details of, like, here's where you set up, and here's where we're going to stretch, and here's where we're going to walk through, and here's where, like, all that stuff is the stuff they were working on last weekend. So, just how ironed out are the details and how rocky are things, kind of out of the gates.
Yeah, and I think last year a lot of people were upset when people came away with takeaways from the Texas State game, and I actually think looking back on it,
they nearly, threw up all over themselves. Yeah. I mean, to a certain extent, yeah.
But I think we did learn a lot about that team that actually translated throughout the year. Like, they ran the ball extremely well, and the score should have been more. Like, there were little things that happened that weren't what happened the rest of the year, but there were still things that you could kind of take forward. Like, at times Gary was inaccurate. At times, the defense gave up an explosive play or had trouble with a mobile quarterback. Like, those things did happen later in the year. The game should have been, a wider margin, but in general, there were some things that I felt like, looking back, we did learn about the team that stuck throughout the year.
Matt Workman, how many tight ends are too many on a depth chart? I don't think there's an answer to that question. It's unlimited. It's a little infinity sign.
I mean, they don't have too many right now, if that's what the question is. They don't. I know everyone's looking at the depth chart and they saw all those oars, but that has more to do with kind of the depth that they built there and the walk-ons that they have. Like Gavin Yates is a really, really good walk-on that they have listed. But yeah, they only have 4 scholarship tight ends. That's not too many.
No. But yeah, I mean, that's a group that you're going to see all of. I think like the D-line, it's a special kind of timing, all came together to create a pretty special group, and I think you're going to see that with the tight ends as well. So definitely enjoy that set of players this year, because who knows when they'll have another solid group like this with a guy like Ben Sims and Drake Dabney, not to mention all of the young players. Mikey, super stoked for the upcoming season, both college and the NFL. Will the NFL have any Baylor vets starting in regular season games not named Xavier Howard or Jalen Petrie?
Good question. Starting Baylor
Starting,
players.
not anything I think off the top of my head, no.
I think there's a chance James Lynch starts in Minnesota. He started a few games late in the year last year. I'm not sure if he's projected to do that, but he might be one to keep an eye on.
I don't know if he's projected to or not. Last I saw on him, he's gained a bunch of good weight to become more of a interior tackle, more of a nose tackle type. Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head the Vikings depth chart, but I think he'll be in a rotation or some sort there. But yeah, in theory, could end up starting in some situations. But yeah, I mean, you asked that question, and I don't think Terrell's starting. I don't think, it's really Petrie and Howard as far as locks go. And today is the day where rosters get cut down to 53. And I haven't had a chance to look over who's getting cut. I know there will be some Baylor guys cut. But yeah, as far as who will be left over and who will be starting, Tyquan would have been one. He would, but he's hurt.
He'll start by the end of the year.
Yeah, but he would be the one that comes to mind for me. I think Terrell's going to take some time. And,
JT's going to take time.
JT's going to take time. He's not going to start right away.
Ebner will have a role, but he won't be the starter.
No, he needs to get healthy. Abram got cut. I still think he'll end up on a practice squad or whatever.
Josh Gordon got cut.
Okay, he did. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, and that's not surprising, actually.
He was on the Chiefs.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I would say, who did I just say? Once they get healthy. Tyquan, that's who I would say. But outside of that, I don't think there's any real guarantees, unless somebody's escaping me. But a lot of backups and a lot of kind of fringe players, and that's where it'll be interesting to see once it shakes out how close they are to 20 or 30 guys still remaining in the league. But Josh Gordon, another one that I need to make note of, and I'll have a piece on that probably sometime tomorrow. Let's go Barrow 8. Hey, guys, loyal listener here. Love the content. Keep up the great work. Maybe only my second or third question. Here goes. Love the inside scoop predictions perspective you guys have on other schools in the Big 12. Made me curious as to what schools may be saying about Baylor heading into the season. If you know what are the best podcasts from other schools around the conference to check out and see what their insight is on Baylor, would also be fun to hear their game recaps after we beat each of them one by one. Thanks.
Yeah, best podcasts for Big 12. I mean, there's Locked On, there's Heartland,
there's a variety of podcasts for every school. I mean, each one of them's got at least 2 to 3 podcasts, and I don't really think that there's I don't listen to individual school podcasts well enough to be like, these are the best. I mean, I could probably roughshod, predict it. I know Oklahoma's got 1 billion podcasts. Yeah. Texas has 1 billion podcasts. Baylor's got 1 billion podcasts
Don't know
at this
Albany's
point.
Podcast.
Don't know Albany's podcast, but yeah, I mean, just honestly, I'm not trying to be smart here, but just Google them. I mean, really, BYU podcast, and there will be however many there are will pop up for you. But as far as individual ones, I don't spend a lot of time listening to the specific ones unless Baylor's playing them, and even then, I only really just pay attention to that for that week alone.
Yeah, I don't really either. I mean, during the off season, I probably listen to a couple just to get more insight. But I mainly read stuff. But I would say, yeah, if you go to Apple Podcasts and type it in the search bar, you'll be able to find some and just click through and try to find the ones you like. I just know the generic Big 12 ones, Heartland, Locked On Big 12. Those are a couple that are pretty good. But yeah, outside of that, this is the podcast for all of that.
Yeah, good luck on finding an Albany podcast because, like he said, I don't know if those exist, but yeah, Cyclone Fanatic does good stuff with Iowa State, Sooner Scoop with Oklahoma. Those are some of the sites, but again,
Orange Bloods with Texas or Inside Texas or whatnot.
Right, or Horns 24/7.
Yeah,
or again, like everybody's got a billion podcasts, so just skip around and find one you like and roll with that, but nothing too specific because there's just a lot of options out there these days. So hopefully you find what you're looking for. Appreciate
and ask more questions in the future. We always want as many questions as possible.
ATX Bear 20, any intel on who gets the number one? I guess nobody for right now.
Yeah, I guess that's where I'm at too. I don't have anything specific or a rumor.
I guess nobody earned it or just, I don't know, but nothing to shed
Maybe
light on
Chapin?
there. Yeah, maybe. It could be anything because there's no answer over on this end. But, just maybe not enough guys or whatever. But, no idea. Also, why Squirrel listed as kick returner but not running back? I know Rule basically fake depth charts. Isn't Aranda somewhat in line with that? It's been a while since last season.
Yeah, I don't think his depth charts are 1,000%
He won't even say he's,
accurate.
I guess he has acknowledged that he's dinged up. And, he's been dealing with some things, and he's even mentioned his knee. But Arena's not going to come out and just give you all the goods of who's in, who's out, and what they're doing, and all of that jazz. I do think he likes to keep some shroud of kind of the opponent guessing, no matter who they are. I think that's kind of where he's coming from, and I wouldn't read too much into depth charts, honestly, beyond this week. Really, I think it's interesting to see kind of where guys are after fall camp, but some teams just like the intern fills these out beyond week one. So Doc Crowell finally wrapping us up here. What is the order of the offers going out? Tell us about prioritization. Any surprises on who was offered ASAP? Guess new offers.
But these offers went out before the dead period technically ended. So it was more, it wasn't the same kind of contact that's going to happen on September 1st. And that's mainly going to be about the guys who already have offers, to be honest. You'll see more offers start to come out, but they've already put out a bunch of offers. So that's why I'm kind of thinking it's not really
What does it tell you about prioritization?
Yeah, it does say some things when guys are offered 2 years before their class is up. It tells you, kind of how elite of a prospect that is at that time. But now that we're getting closer and in 2024, they've already offered, a significant amount of guys. It doesn't really matter who's offered now. They've already done that. That prioritization has already passed. So now it's more about finding guys who jump on the radar. And that's the other thing. Some guys jump on the radar during their junior year, and you're like, oh, man, I like that guy a lot better than the other guy I already offered. So that's kind of where I kind of lean towards. It doesn't mean a whole lot unless it's way, way in advance or one of the first offers in the class. All
right. With the Sic'Em 365, with Sic'Em 365 joining a local TV station, will we see this segment guest starring, or will that just stay Sic'Em 365 radio? I guess you're asking about this podcast. No, it'll just be cut-ups from the radio show. At least that's the plan. Last I heard it. And Doc says, I'm just ready for Albany. But no, the Bearcast isn't going to be a part of that. Maybe down the line if the relationship expands or something, but it's just going to be pulled from the radio show for starters. But excited about joining up and having some local TV representation, just a part of the brand growing. So do appreciate you, Doc, and hopefully you'll be tuning into that along with a lot of other people as well. And before we get into our Big 12, I guess, predictions, I did need to make mention before we forget and move on. There was a pretty massive commit for Baylor basketball, was there not?
Yes, there was.
Jason Asamoto yesterday, and didn't want to run off without mentioning that, but another massive pickup for Scott Drew and Baylor basketball as he announced his commitment to kick off what should be a pretty big week here.
We were on top of it. We talked about, thanks to Ashley pretty much for having that prediction in for a while and, getting us geared up for the official visit that happened this past weekend. He committed on the official visit, and he's a top 15 player in the country. And according to 247, he's number 12 player in the class. Composite-wise, he's number 16. So right in that top 15, a great get. He's about 6'8", 190 pounds, so a small forward type, very long, fits kind of everything that Baylor wants in a wing position guy. And so, this is big time. He had 22 offers from all kinds of schools all over the country. He came on his official visit, and it was over. And we kind of highlighted that and kind of felt like it was going in that direction. And now Baylor has a start to the 2024 class. And we've seen what they've done the past few classes. They've really been elite on the recruiting trail, and that's continued. And this is a great, great get to kick off the 2024 class.
Yep. So any other week, he might be like the focal point of the podcast, but it is football season now, but still a massive get for Scott Drew and company. And, yeah, kickstarting that 2024 class with a 5-star talent and Jason Asamoah. So, Grayson, the Big 12 games this week to close this thing out.
Yeah, let's go to the Big 12 schedule. So we'll start with Thursday, September 1st. Central Michigan travels to Stillwater to take on Oklahoma State at 6 p.m. on FS1. Are the Cowboys going to get upset week 1 of the season?
No. Spencer Sanders should play well, I would think. This is a big year for him, his final year for him, and I'm curious to see Derek Mason's defense a little bit, to what extent we see, what he displays, but no, I'm not worried about the Cowboys.
Yeah, I like Oklahoma State to win this game. I will take them 41-21. I think they get this one pretty handedly, but I do think Central Michigan will, score some points and do a couple things that are tough, especially in week 1 of the season. That Central Michigan's actually a decent football program. Next game up at the same time, West Virginia at Pittsburgh, number 17 ranked Pittsburgh on ESPN. The Backyard Brawl is back. Who do you got in this one?
I have no idea on this game. I'm not major on West Virginia, but, Pitt's had a lot of turnover as well between quarterback and obviously Jordan Addison. But come on, Neil Brown's got to win this game, right? I mean, this would be a huge win for the Mountaineers. I don't have a great feel one way or the other. I mean, part of me kind of is leaning Pitt, and I don't know why. Keaton Slovis has just won me over, I suppose. I don't know, but for West Virginia's sake, I'll go with the Mountaineers in this game.
Yeah, Pitt's defense is very, very good, and that's going to be some problems for West Virginia. I'm a believer in West Virginia, and I think they're going to win either this game or the game at Virginia Tech in a few weeks, and I've been going back and forth on which one I think they're going to win. I'm going to take them. I think I'm going to take them to win this game. Okay. I do. It's at the Steelers Stadium, I believe, for this one. So kind of a home game for Pitt. So I'll go with West Virginia. I think they're going to take this one 24-21. Really, really close game, but I like the Mountaineers.
Yeah, I think Pitt is favored in this game.
7.5.
Yeah, but I'm going to go with the Mountaineers.
Moving on to Friday, Tennessee Tech travels to Kansas at 7 p.m. on ESPN Plus to the Jayhawks. Get one step closer to covering their over-under season win total of 2.5.
Well, they damn sure better, because if they don't beat Tennessee Tech, then there's not a whole lot of hope the rest of the way, that's for sure. But, yeah, they get a win in game number 1.
Yeah, I like Kansas winning this one pretty easily. I'll take them 37-13 to knock off Tennessee Tech in the first game of the year. Next up, TCU travels to Colorado. 9 p.m. on ESPN. Do the Horned Frogs get a win in Sonny Dykes' first game as the head coach?
I say yes, because even though they have a lot of questions, I still like them better in the shape that they're in, better than Colorado. Colorado could very well be looking at changing coaches again in the near future. They don't really have an identity. The reason I even watched a lot of Colorado, the plethora of Texas kids has started to even fade a bit. They're kind of there, man. They're not a factor in today's college football, really. And TCU's trying to become a factor once again. And they were, obviously very rocky year last year. I think they're going to have a lot less stress to be playing with, and it's going to be different. But, again, this isn't an offense that Sonny Dykes bringing in that's going to, take them several games to figure out how they're, operating or anything like that. So I think they've got just enough talent coming back, even if the quarterback's a major question on who all that will be and everything. They've got a couple guys they know a little bit about, at least. It's not a complete question mark. So, yeah, I'm going TCU in this game.
Yeah, TCU is a 13.5-point favorite. I think that's entirely too many points.
That's a lot, yeah.
Colorado, all 4 of their wins last year were at home. They also lost to Texas A&M 10-7 the first game of the year last year. I think people forget that. They took A&M to the wire to start the season. I think TCU is going to have some problems trying to score in this game, but I think Colorado will have issues as well because they're just not very good. Ultimately, I think TCU will win this game, but I think it is going to be tight. It's going to be a very, very close game. I'll take the Horned Frogs 27-20. They'll knock off Colorado. Moving on to the Saturday slate, Southeast Missouri State travels to Ames to take on Iowa State at 1 p.m. on ESPN+.
Iowa State moving on.
Yeah, Iowa State wins this one 45-13. Easy win for the Cyclones. Next
Even
up,
though they've stumbled out of the gates the last few years, it seems like.
Well, it's always week 2 when they play Iowa.
Yeah, it's always a little shaky start somewhere for them, but yeah, not this week.
Don't worry, I'll be taking Iowa next week.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Next game up, UTEP, who lost their first game of the year to North Texas, I believe. They travel to Norman to take on number 9 ranked Oklahoma at 2:30 on Fox. First game for Brent Venables as the head coach.
That'll be interesting, just the wrinkles of having a new era begin, but this is all Oklahoma, and I'm not worried about it one single bit.
Yeah, this is going to be a blowout. I like Oklahoma 55-17 to knock off UTEP. Next up is South Dakota traveling to Kansas State to take on the Wildcats at 6 p.m. on ESPN+. Lots of high hopes for Kansas State this year.
Yeah, there is, so much so that I'm starting to kind of like want to downplay them a little bit because now it's kind of running out of control of just the K-State love. But, it's valid for the reasons that are often cited, Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez when he's good. But, again, there's always that caveat of, like, if he can be good, if he can not turn the ball over, but if he can do that, like, they could be really stinking good potentially on offense. But, yeah, K-State all day.
Yeah, I'm going to take K-State, but Kansas State struggles in these type of matchups historically. They play these games really close, and South Dakota's a pretty good FCS program, so I'll take them to win it 35-17, but I think it'll be closer than the scoreboard says by the end of it. Next up, Murray State travels to Lubbock to take on Texas Tech. This game's at 7 p.m. on ESPN+ as the Joey McGuire era begins.
Yeah, they've certainly, gosh, I mean, is that place going to be able to contain the excitement? They've been literally building it up for like 10 months at this point, a little less than that, I guess. Actually, yeah, a few months, but it seems like it's been 10 months. I mean, the countdown and all of the off-season hype. So I'm excited to just finally see it, excited to see what that team looks like, and, yeah, I expect them to get a win.
Yeah, the route is on in this one. I think Tech's going to run up the score as much as they possibly can. So I like Texas Tech to win this one 55-16. Next up, UL Monroe traveling to Austin to take on the Texas Longhorns at 7 p.m. on the Longhorn Network.
Texas has a lot of weirdness surrounding it right now, and I don't know how much of it's reality and how much of it's just people putting that on them and being weird about them and everything that they do, like the depth chart thing. Like, I see why you can read into that, and I can also see why it's stupid to read into that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know where Texas is. Like, is it all just preseason talk that's like wishful thinking on the part of people, or is it still just kind of a weird, era of, Sark finding his footing? And I don't know. I don't know what to make of them, man. Like, every year is just a crapshoot on whether it's legitimate hype or not, and mostly it's been not. But I do think they're exceptionally talented at several spots. I know it's what's said every year, but I'll pick Texas in this game. But I really don't know. I'm fascinated to see, like, what version of this team will we really see this season, and what does that mean ultimately in the long run?
Yeah, too much offense on the Texas side, but I do think UL Monroe will put up some points, and I think they will stretch the Texas defense a little bit. I like Texas 52-24, but I'm really intrigued to see how Quinn Ewers does in his first start. All those weapons
finally
comes together.
Finally.
And then what their offensive line looks like as well. That's going to be very important to watch. And finally, the game of the week, like it is every week, Baylor taking on Albany. Albany traveling to McLean Stadium to take on the number 10 ranked Baylor Bears. This game's at 6 p.m. on ESPN+.
Yeah, I'm going Baylor all day. I would get in trouble here as far as like the spread and all that. That's why 6 touchdowns. I mean, in theory they should win by that, but I mean that's also asking a lot to win by 6 touchdowns. So, anyways, I expect them to win massive. I don't know if it'll be 42 points or not, but I expect them to win comfortably and for everybody to have a nice, relaxing Saturday evening.
Yeah, I'll take Baylor 66-10. I think they're going to blow the doors off this one. I think it'll be a blowout, and even the backups will be able to run the football against Albany. So I got Baylor winning that one extremely easily, but that's to be expected. Albany, not a great program and in the FCS level.
And not who they were originally set to play. They're supposed to play Louisiana Tech, which I didn't mention when the person asked, like, why are we playing Albany? It's because they had to make up a game after La Tech fell through for whatever mutual reasons that ended up being or what. I know La Tech also picked up a big opponent right after that, from what I remember. But either way, that's why. It's kind of a last-minute almost type of a thing. So that's why Albany's making their trek down from New York to come play on the banks of the Brazos. But yeah, I do expect it to be a pretty easy game.
Louisiana Tech's playing at Missouri on Thursday.
Yeah, so there you go. Yeah, there's a whole little thing where that game changed, but should make for a more relaxing opener, I think, than if they were playing La Tech. And I don't even know how good La Tech's supposed to be. But, yeah, if there's anybody out there that thinks this is going to be a tough test, and I'd love to hear the case for why, because, I mean, I just think it's going to be all Baylor and kind of name the score. And, you know, should be fun. Should be fun to be back out there and fun to have some answers on some things, even though not everything will be answered in week one. But, Grayson, I think that about covers it. Anything before we go here?
I mean, just looking at the Sic'Em 365 premium side, we have so many articles out right now. So if you're not a premium subscriber, please consider it. We have all kinds of content, from previews to Dave Aranda notes to a hype video to just, you know, an individual opponent outlook, a schedule analysis. We have all kinds of stuff, and that continues all throughout the season. So be sure to check out the premium side, and also 365 Sports Radio, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6, all kinds of great content and guests throughout the season.
Yep, tune in at 3 o'clock. As Grayson said, we'll be talking with Smokey and Paul and getting into a variety of different things. And like you said, we got hype video on the way, got a ton of articles out there, and now's the time to sign up. And if you want to support the show, support the YouTube channel and all those things, and subscribe, hit the like button, all that normal jazz. But if you really want to go the extra mile, then sign up for the premium section of Sic'Em365.com and directly, you know, be a part of the crew that way as well and support the site and all that we're doing. So hopefully you enjoy, and hopefully you're able to pour through all of that content that we are delivering. And it's only Tuesday, so there's still a lot more to come. But appreciate everybody out there for asking the questions to start us off this season. And appreciate everybody out there for listening as well. We'll have a lot to talk about. Win, yeah, I'm not going to say win or. No, it's going to be a win on Saturday. But how that goes about and who the standouts are and all that we'll get into next week. But good to have some actual action to discuss. So thanks to everybody behind the scenes, including Garrett Ross. For Grayson Grunhafer, I'm Craig Smoke. And this has been the Bearcast on Sic'Em 365 Radio 365 Sports.